from the Tennessee World Affairs Council, and welcome to our webinar series, Global Nashville with Karl Dean. My name is Liane Henschke, Executive Director of the Council, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization whose mission is to equip Tennesseans with the global understanding and civic confidence needed to translate world affairs into opportunity, leadership, and informed participation. We advance this mission through the following programs. We have our webinars, Global Dialogue and Global Nashville with Karl Dean. We have our Distinguished Speaker Series, which is our in-person events, the education program, and Global Eats. Our membership, I must say, continues to grow, and we warmly invite you to become a TNWAC member and join a community committed to understanding global affairs. Please access our website, tnwac.org, for more information on our programs. Today, it is my pleasure to welcome Mr. Kumar Kolin, Trinetix Chief Business Officer, Healthcare in North America. This chat will be moderated by Karl Dean, former mayor of Nashville and chair of the board of TNWAC. We will reserve approximately 10 minutes for a Q&A. Please feel free to submit your questions through the chat. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's moderator. Karl Dean served as the sixth mayor of Nashville and Davidson County. He was elected in 2007 and re-elected in 2011. Prior to that, he served as Nashville's public defender and later as Metro Law Director. He is currently a faculty member at the Vanderbilt Law School and has also taught at Belmont University and Boston University. Thank you both for being with us today, and thank you to our audience for joining this webinar. So I now invite Karl Dean to introduce Kumar Kolin.
Well, thank you. Kumar Kolin is a technology executive and entrepreneur with 25 plus years of experience driving innovation and growth across global markets. Based in Nashville, he leads sales, go-to-market strategy, and strategic partnerships at Trinetix, advancing design, engineering, and advanced technology services across North America with a focus on technology. A co-founder of CloudX, Kumar builds and scales high-performing engineering teams across the U.S. and South America. Previously, as president and CTO at Emens, he doubled the healthcare technology business from 70 million to 140 million in 3 years. Earlier at Deloitte, he led large-scale global operations, scaling teams of 15,000 plus and professionals establishing delivery centers supporting enterprise transformation worldwide. He combines a global perspective with a strong local commitment to innovation, talent, and development, and Nashville's growth as a hub for technology and healthcare. Welcome.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us today. We appreciate you taking the time. And we appreciate all that you and your company have done for the Tennessee World Affairs Council.
Thank you.
So I guess I would start with asking you what exactly your company does.
So, Karl, we build software at the end of the day. But I think what distinguishes us from many other companies is the software industry historically has focused, well, there have been amazing advancements in technology. They've always historically focused on the building useful software. There are ideas and people build useful software. And there are a lot of tools and techniques and processes that are there to do that. But the big miss in the industry is to build usable and trustworthy and in some cases delightful software, right? So it is sort of the the human element and the business element that needs to be infused into the technology. So the marriage of domain design and engineering. That's what we bring to the table, which is very different from many others that just focus on the technology aspect of it. And it's a craft that we have honed since for the last decade. And so we build software that is useful, usable, trustworthy, and delightful. And healthcare is one of the industries that we focus on.
Are you headquartered here in Middle Tennessee?
We're headquartered here in Brentwood. That is where I am right now.
And were you specifically, did you choose to be in Brentwood, to be in the Nashville area because of healthcare? How much did that factor into that decision?
So the starting point was actually one of our large clients, which is based in Nashville. And it's actually a non-healthcare client, and they served as a marquee client and continue to be a marquee client for us. But as we started to go deeper and expand our healthcare footprint, and this was about 2 years ago, it just felt natural for us to just consolidate and just expand our presence in Nashville area. So we didn't come here for healthcare, but we are staying here and growing here for healthcare.
Yeah. And how large are you in terms of employees?
So we're about 1,500 people across the globe between US and Europe and South America. All our clients, I would say, 99% of our clients are based in the US.
And when you located to Nashville as a technology company, I guess would be fair to say, did you see that as a disadvantage or an advantage?
It was very neutral. I moved here in 2008, and I would say Nashville definitely at the time was not a tech destination or any destination, beyond those who wanted to, come to Broadway. But we were always working in a remote fashion, Karl, globally. So for us, the local presence of a talent pool was not as important as probably it is in some cases it is now. So it was very neutral for us. We could have been any other city in the United States, and it would have been okay. But very different Nashville today, right? I'm talking about back in 2008, 2009, when we first came here.
Right. And you've presumably been successful in recruiting talent and bringing people to Nashville. Has that been any issues there?
Well, short answer is recruiting good talent is always hard. No matter where you are in the world. And I think the plus and minus of it is with a lot of growth comes a lot of great talent that comes to our city. But there is also the demand for great talent that also increases, sometimes at a pace that is greater than the talent that is actually coming in. So I think we are a very employee first, we're a culture first company. So it gives us a unique advantage to offer sort of the benefit of being in a larger company, but still operating as a boutique and a startup, right? So we are fortunate to be able to attract talent that others find a little harder to.
Yeah. What are your responsibilities as the chief business?
Yeah. So a couple of things, so it's not really necessarily a sales job, and I've never been a salesperson. I've always been a technologist. So I wear two hats. One is to build and run and grow our healthcare business. And that involves working closely with many of our providers, and Nashville is great for us, and health tech companies, some of the payers, to really make a difference in the healthcare industry, where you can actually use technology as a force multiplier and to grow that part of the business. The non-healthcare part of the business, my responsibilities are largely to set our strategy as it relates to growing our business. But an important part of my job is also the partnerships that we have with the community of Nashville, right? I think that is part of my responsibility. So as in Trinetix, we say we will do things if it has an impact for our client, the industry, or for our community. So it's part of the reason why we are with TNWAC and we are partnering closely, not just with TNWAC, but many other community organizations in Nashville.
Yeah. So let me ask you a little bit about your own background. Where are you from originally, and how did you get involved in technology?
So I grew up in South India, and I moved to the U.S. first when I was 27. I came here as part of the technology wave of the 2000s, and then I started, a bulk of my career was at Deloitte. So I was recruited by Deloitte to actually go back to India to start the consulting practice for Deloitte US, the US firm. And then that role expanded to me building and running all of Deloitte's operations in India, which I did for a while. But I've always been in technology, and the India role was a little different because it was a little bit more of a general manager role. Very fortunate to be admitted to the US partnership of Deloitte, and I came back to the US in 2008 to run the technology organization, of Deloitte, and we're actually based here in Nashville, and that's what brought me to Nashville. And building software and being a technologist is always what I've done. And in 2017, I retired from Deloitte to actually start my own ventures to do something different. And I've known Trinetix I was a client of theirs, 15 years ago, and now I'm an integral part of Trinetix.
Right. And you mentioned most of your clients are in the U.S., and your responsibilities include North America, but your presence is global?
Our presence is global. Our European practice, ironically, while many of our talent pool is based in Europe, our European practice is about a year old, so that's why, we have, that is the 0.1 or 1% that we actually have outside the US. It could change in the next few years.
Right. And I guess the expansion and having more flights at the Nashville airport is something that you look favorably upon.
100%. I still think it's one of the best airports in the world.
Oh, good. Well, I think I agree. Yeah. But we need more international flights, though, I think.
That is true. I'd love for any of our long distance flights to be able to land in Nashville.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. So in terms of software, what are the big issues? I mean, what are we hear a lot about AI, and how that's going to change the world. And I think you can't pick up a magazine today or without seeing an article about it and some of the debates that are going on.
Yeah,
is that something that you all are involved in?
100%. I mean, fortunately, we so I'll sort of apologize to folks that are skeptical, and also to folks that think this is actually going to change the world and leave everybody without jobs, right? I think both of them are wrong, at least in my opinion. The way I think about it, Karl, is I would say we are in the third era of, for example, we started with, if you say the first one was mechanical, right? So we sort of offloaded the muscle and the strength to machines, and whether it's the steam engine or it's the assembly line, that's sort of where that started. The second era was all about computing and logic, right? So whether it's calculators, computers, and so on and so forth. I feel we're in the third era of where we are offloading synthesis and some parts of our cognitive capabilities to a digital framework. And I think just like people thought when computers came, jobs going to go away, or when machines came that there was actually going to be no use for workers. I think that is the same in this case. Maybe the impact may be a little bit broader, bigger, but I think a lot of times, people, I think, are either skeptical or too hyper about it because they simply don't understand what it actually means. I'm actually thinking, the next era would scare some people even more, and we are sort of in the intersection of healthcare and technology. The next era of biodigital is actually going to be the most interesting one, where technology and humans get integrated. So there are new things like brain-computer interfaces, for example, right? So I think that's probably sort of the next era that will evolve. Um, I'm not as worried about it as much as with any with great power comes great responsibility kind of a thing. I think we need to find the right guardrails. I think people are trying to put the right guardrails. I also feel people are trying to put the wrong guardrails. But I think we will sort this. This will sort itself out. But I do feel like it it's a lot more hype, and I think people are a lot more worried than I think they should be.
And I guess with the next step here, that may be something that Nashville hasn't sort of a natural interest in, or
Yeah, 100%. So Nashville is so I sort of call it, we are in an incredible spot, Carl. If you think about, it's in an investment thesis, you always want like defensive growth investment, right? So you want where there is a bedrock, but it also has, growth. So Nashville for us, we have the bedrock of our, healthcare ecosystem. $97+ billion actually is in Nashville. We do have manufacturing to add on top of that. Our infrastructure, and the investments that have been made, those are all sort of really, the foundations, and obviously music and entertainment, gives us the identity. But in all this sort of stable healthcare manufacturing infrastructure, you now have the ability to fuel that with technology, right? And I think Nashville is prime in the middle of taking advantage of that. And remember, we have two very interesting industries as it relates to AI. One is extremely regulated as it relates to healthcare. I think there are many things happening in that, and it's also there are the most interesting use cases of healthcare, whether it's as it relates to drug development or triaging or even better operations of hospitals, like better scheduling. But the entertainment industry obviously has the most, I wouldn't say hype, but the most use and fear, right? In terms of, intellectual property and creators' rights. And you saw, Taylor Swift wants to trademark a variety of things. Matthew McConaughey has already wanted to trademark his all right. And, but I feel if there is a epicenter of where we can come together to solve it the right way, I can't think of a better place than Nashville for that.
Yeah. Are there things that Nashville specifically should be doing? I mean, I'm put on an economic development hat and think about how we move the city forward and have growth. Are there things that we should be doing that we're not doing, or things that we should be thinking about right now that maybe we're not thinking deeply enough about?
Yeah, I think, there are some things that are doing really well, right? Like the choose how you move, the smart signals and using AI to, solve, there's investments going in that path. There are clearly areas where we should be doing more, like the smart grid. For example, the ice storms, the recent ice storms revealed a fairly significant gap in our infrastructure and our use of technology to really change how things are operating. So I actually do feel like while there is funding, I think we should direct some funding to, some of these low-hanging fruits. They're not easy, but they're obvious, they're evident. I think we should direct money there. But I think the biggest thing for any community, any society, I feel, is around workforce development and education. Okay. And I think there is a significant gap, and that gap is going to widen quite rapidly in terms of what we teach and what we expect people to do after they finish, right? Because historically, we have over at least last several decades, it's all been around, logic and intellect and problem solving and so on and so forth. But now we got to shift that mindset to be a strategist, to actually be an architect, to be the person providing instructions as opposed to the person who's actually executing. And I don't think we are teaching our kids, teaching either in schools, colleges, and even in jobs, people to do that. And I think that is where the investments needs to go. So it's almost like, I think somebody used the term, just like the bailout, we need the skill out. We need investments to go towards reskilling, and not even just upskilling. I think we just have to completely reskill a lot of people.
Well, is the lack in education, is it I guess the term STEM, is it math and science, or is it beyond that, reading skills? Or
I think it's beyond that. I think all the basic patterns of things that people need to know, I think all those things actually remain the same. But I think how do you train people that are coming out of schools and colleges to be better instructors of doing things, as opposed to being the actual doer, right? In many cases, the concepts become a lot more important than than many other things, right? So I think because you are now the strategist and the architect. So and right now, concepts are interesting, people teach them, but you go back to like, solving a bunch of equations, and that's how you sort of learn math, right? I think that is sort of unimportant, because you don't need to solve any equations anymore, because, this computer is solving these for you. But if you understand the concepts better, then we are able to instruct better. And I think that is where the fundamental shift has to take place.
yeah, and do you see that need to be at the, I guess, elementary, high school, college, all down the line? Or
I think all down the line, but if I had to pick, I may be biased because my kids are just about to, start high school next year. But despite that, I would say high school is where we should start, because that is sort of the most imminent need for us. That cohort of people in the next few years are going to be smack in the middle of when the realistic use and adoption of AI is going to be at its peak. And I think we need to get kids ready for that, because without that, we wouldn't know what to do with them in terms of, what are the jobs that would be available, for these kids.
right. So, I mean, I don't know the answer to this, but I wonder how many high schools focus on AI at this point, or is it all sort of more theoretical discussion? Or
I actually think, I think the focus should be not necessarily on AI as much as first, let's take a step back. I think fundamentally everybody has to, shed any, not be intimidated, and just learn, what does AI even mean? I would say, Karl, from technologists to high school teachers to, the person that is mowing the lawn, everybody's either intimidated or is misinformed, right? And it's a spectrum, obviously. Most people are, I shouldn't say everybody. Many people are, at least, at the very minimum. And I think in schools and in colleges, maybe in schools, not AI shouldn't be a subject. It should be, people should teach about what does it mean as a concept, right? how does it work? How can you use it? How can you use it the right way? What are the downsides? What can you do with AI? And what more importantly, what you cannot do with AI? Because they're getting this thrown in their face to say, hey, here is your cat litter robot that actually is now AI powered, right? I mean, I kid you not, that's an actual ad. So I'm like, what does that even mean? And I think we got to start with basic education of people about, what does AI really mean? And I think when people spend some time to understand what it actually means, I think they will start exploring, experimenting, and I think this is true both in sort of personal life, and this is what we tell corporations as well. We run these things called AI labs to actually help them explore and experiment so they get a better handle on how AI is useful and meaningful for them. So long-winded way, I don't think we need to necessarily teach AI as much as explain the concepts and just have people do it.
Right? Are there countries other than not the United States, but other countries that you would look to as models? Are there countries getting ahead of us on this?
Many of them are. I mean, but again, nobody's as large as we are. China is a whole different ball game. They're using AI in incredible ways, but I'm not saying they're good ways. So largely, centrally regulated. But I would say the United States is fairly advanced in how we are actually using it. I don't think we are behind anybody. Europe is going through some very interesting time because they're trying to wrangle a beast that then they sort of don't know how to actually do it. I'll give you a very simple example and it's happening even in the United States. People, they say, hey, we need explainable models, right? So in the HIPAA 2.0 Act, you have to be able to explain, a patient has the right to be explained, how an AI made a decision. But the reality is that it's an impossibility because, it's like a single output of a massively weighted sum, right? So when I look at, if you say, ask somebody to explain, how did you come to this result? When I look at that mathematical equation, at least for a normal person, it looks like a bunch of Greek alphabets and letters and numbers and some operators in between, right? But it doesn't really explain anything because it's almost impossible to explain. It's like which grain of sand that made the dune collapse, right?
Right.
So the point I'm making is we are trying to put guardrails on something when sometimes these guardrails are not possible. They're not practical, not possible. So we put something that is that used to work in sort of a non-AI world and try to retrofit it. And I think we just have to fundamentally rethink this and say what are the right guardrails. So Europe's struggling a little bit, with that. I feel like in the United States we are off to the races a little bit slower in terms of what should be the controls that need to go in. Should something like Section 230 apply to generation in AI? But I think I don't see anybody way ahead of us, quite frankly, at least at the size and scale that we are.
What are your thoughts on the role of government when it comes to AI? I mean, I think that's kind of I don't know if that's the big debate, but those who see great dangers either want the industry to kind of regulate itself, or they think the government has to step in, or then the government stepping in has all these regulatory issues that may be negative to entrepreneurship. And
I do agree with part of the decision that hey, there should be no separate AI body that governs something because that is scattered so across that it's pervasive. Whether it's the SEC or the FDA, it doesn't matter. I think this is a little bit more pervasive. If you at the core of it, I don't think the government's job changes. I think the government's job to protect the citizens, the government's job to protect communities, to keep us safe, to keep us secure, to provide. I don't think, quite frankly, the government's job changes, in my opinion. It's just that the guardrails that we have in place to protect many things, whether it is, just like, we expect the government to protect us from a nuclear war. So they expect to help us protect us from like a cyber attack, right? I think the role of the government remains the same. How we protect that and how we actually serve the citizens and how the government actually plays its role, I think remains the same. The mechanics are different, but I think the role is the same. I don't think there has to be a different role because there is AI, and tomorrow, in the next few years, there is going to be quantum computing, and that changes the game, completely differently. So,
Right. Well, what's your thought about the number one, the current state of the economy? Are you optimistic, bullish, bearish?
well, it depends on the day. Depends on what happened the day before. No, but jokes apart. I mean, it's certainly we've gone through quite a bit of changes as it relates to the global economy. I think the power dynamics are shifting. I think global supply chain or the markets themselves are trying to recalibrate itself in this sort of new world order. But the fortunate thing for us, at least, this is just being incredibly selfish as somebody, as a technologist in the intersection of healthcare and technology in Nashville, right? So this is my very, very myopic point of view, maybe, but this is just where we are. I think it's an incredible opportunity, no matter how the winds change, from an economic perspective as somebody in Nashville, because like I said, we are backed by a defensive, in a long-term industry and fueled by technology, right? So defensive growth is an incredible spot for people in Nashville and for businesses in Nashville. So that I'm extremely bullish about, right? As a Nashvilleian, I'm extremely bullish. As an American or as a world citizen, I think I'm not going to worry about something I'm not going to worry about. So I can't control.
Right. Well, in terms of the recent news and things, has the issue with tariffs in the last year, has that had any big impact on what you do, or is software sort of immune from that?
I wouldn't say immune, but I would say less affected. I don't think it took a very heavy toll. I think the worst thing, or the worst damage, was caused more by uncertainty than the tariffs themselves. Right? So where the pace of decision making slows down, and whenever pace of decision making slows down, then our businesses get impacted, right? It's the same, deal cycles get longer because decisions are longer, because people are not sure about whether they should spend or not, what they should do. So I think uncertainty definitely caused some slowness, some significant slowness in many cases. And
Mm-hmm.
quarters down the line, but I think that's where we have been impacted rather than the tariffs themselves.
Yeah, the general uncertainty that surrounds the investment climate and everything else. Yeah. I mean, you've sort of answered this, but let me sort of conclude with, you mentioned education is probably the number one thing we should be concerned with, and I would agree with that. I think that's been true for Nashville anyway for many years. That's the if we can hit that right, we'd be in great shape. Is there anything else in terms that concerns you about Nashville and the future economy and technology that we should be addressing?
Yeah, I think my concern, I think, is really back to I think people have to learn and understand and partner with people that can help them use AI the right way. I feel like there are companies that are spending, thousands, millions, if not more dollars in wasting money and reinventing the wheel when others have solved this problem. I feel like we will run into a situation where there's just a lot of money that is just wasted. We could use a lot of that instead to help do it the right way, which actually includes education, infrastructure, and maybe even helping the government spend money the right way as opposed to wasting them. There is an incredible amount of wastage that is happening in the industry right now, chasing windmills.
Right. Leanne, we have a question.
Yes, I'm going to read the question. 2 years ago, Nashville Mayor Freddie O'Connell signed a MOU with the mayor of UK West Yorkshire consolidated area to create a two-way bridge for innovation and sales of medical healthcare technology. Would you like to see efforts to create similar relationships with the region in India?
Very different markets, and I think very different economic profiles, very different. I think, as it relates to sharing of innovation, certainly. I mean, I think there's a natural fit between, UK and US in terms of how sort of similar. I think it would be extremely dichotomous. So I don't know, and I am not a macro, economics person. Some of that really has always escaped me since high school. So short answer is I don't see how, other than, I mean, there is a great partnership and relationship between India and the United States. But I don't know. I don't, as it relates to healthcare, I feel like we are like apples and oranges, or a fruit and something else, not even related.
Thanks. Anything else, Leanne?
Yes, I would like to thank you, Karl and Kumar, for this insightful discussion, highlighting Nashville's continued growth as a global city and also improve our workforce education, especially in high schools and universities. So this program will be recorded and made available on tnwac.org. Thank you all for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at future TNWAC events. Goodbye for now.
Let me just thank Kumar for doing this today, but also let me thank you for deciding to come to Nashville. I think you've made great contributions, and I'm sure you'll continue to do so.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Karl. Thank you, Leanne, and look forward to meeting you guys in person soon. Yeah, take care.
Good. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.